I'm happy to welcome Jeff Fioravanti to demonstrate pastel arts with us. And welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yay, Jeff! Oh, look at this palette. It's wonderful.
Yeah, so Dawn told me you were going to film this, so I've been starving myself for 5 days because they said the camera puts 5 pounds onto you. So I figured this way I come out looking okay. Yeah. And hopefully, hello all the people back in Winthrop land. Hopefully you pick up my voice as well so that you can hear me. So we're going to try and get some of this done for you today. I brought the easels I have, the 2 main easels that I tend to use when I do plein air painting. So this easel here is based on the Gloucester easel. You'll actually see some of the painters like Winslow Homer will do paintings and you'll see the artists using these. I tend to use this one only if I'm driving somewhere and I'm not going very far from my car, like maybe from here to the wall, because it's kind of heavy to trek in and out and everything. Whereas this is the other plein air, and this is what I tend to use more often. This is called a leader easel, and you can come up and look at it. Right now I'm using it for, to hold my iPad for the image here. But normally you would put the panel here, and this is just a basically tripod that you would use for cameras and things like that. This is a Benro, and then it has these extensions. I put these Velcro pieces on there to hold it, because if you basically just put the box there, they would just fall through, and get enough mess and everything. So feel free to come up and look at those when you get a chance. I already kind of sketched out what I'm going to be doing here, because you don't want to spend a few hours watching me draw. You're here to watch me apply pastel. So that's what we're going to do. I brought the pastels. This and the things that are in this back row are what I tend to bring with me when I plein air paint, and I bring them in that backpack over there.
Where do you set them up, Jeff? You have
I just leave them in the backpack, and I pull them out and put them on, and I'll even do things like this. We'll just stack it on top, and then I'll pull it aside, because they're different hardnesses and softnesses. So those are the hardest ones. And I tend to use, when I plein air paint, I tend to start with these and lay in the color first with these, and then I start applying, and they kind of go in the different hardnesses. So those are the softest ones, and then these are the next, and these are kind of almost a combination. So I tend to do that. This is actually a plein air box, but you need a pack mule to carry this. This thing is heavy even without the pastels. So I just tend to use this in my studio area. I brought it with you just so you can see a lot of different types of pastels. I brought these as well. This is unison pastels. This is blue green earth. I find they do really well. You can see they're messy. A lot of pastels will clean them off. I don't clean them off. I just don't worry about it. But I think this blue green earth works well with seascapes for especially our area. And these are Terry Ludwig's. This is the Umber Shadows, which has a lot of different things that tend to work well with some surf and rocks and things like that as well. It's just kind of more so you can see what we got going on here. So you'll notice, with the piece here, I draw the horizon line all the way through. That way I know it's basically in an even line here, and the next thing you know, you basically, well, why is my horizon line here? Because it's back there, so we might as well draw it all the way through as a staging point and everything. I just use regular, usually number 2 pencil, maybe, and then maybe some vine charcoal that I'll put in some of the darker areas. They're just placeholders in a lot of respects. So I'm going to take, if you come up, and look at the photo, you'll see, I'm going to kind of change a little bit of the sky because, you know, it's just a plain blue, and we're gonna try and add some other stuff in there to make it a little more interesting. So, without much further ado, let's start laying in some colors. We tend to, with pastel, you tend to layer in a lot of times dark to light, kind of more like, you know, like oil painters would work. But I'll tell you, pastel's a very flexible medium, very accommodating medium. A lot of like pastelists will do a watercolor painting underneath, okay, and gouache painting. You can use thinned oil paints, and these boards that I have here, and I'll pass one around a little bit. These boards, the paper is welcoming to all those mediums as well. So.
The paper textured, or do you use?
Yes, it
different
is.
textures?
This brand of paper is called UArt, and UArt comes in 7 different grits. This is 400, which is kind of the middle area. So the higher the number, the smoother the paper. So if you were like using 200 grit, you would be using a lot of pastel because it just eats it up. And I wear a glove. You know, when I first started, I used to use a lot of blending with my fingers, but with the gritted paper, who needs to, like, you know, rip your fingers off with the gritted paper? Plus, you know, that would only be help if my other vocation was like a safe cracker and I didn't want to leave prints.
How did you get interested in pastels?
Well, it kind of started, my late wife, when she decided to go back to college, we both graduated from Salem State, and when she decided to go back to college to get a second degree, we both had business administration degrees, and she was going back to get an accounting degree as well. So I was sitting around, you know, twiddling my thumbs, and my aunt up in Gloucester, she was doing, taking pastel lessons. And visiting one time, I was like, huh, well, that's something that could be interesting. I can do that while, you know, my wife's off at school and her classes. I can do some of this stuff, you know. And so and my aunt was doing pastels, so that's why I kind of do pastels, or I started pastels. Plus, I always worked a full-time job, and one advantage of pastels is you just open the box and they're there.
So how long have you been doing this?
Well, you know,
How many years?
as they give you the standard answer, you know, as all artists will tend to do,
All
I've
my
been doing
life.
this all my life.
All my
You
life.
know, so that would be 65 years. But no, I mean, I didn't start. I mean, I used to draw growing up and everything. When my brothers, I have an older and a younger brother, and when we go visit, you know, our grandparents, and as boys tend to do, we get rambunctious. My 2 brothers were usually stuck over in a corner, you know, you go to that corner, you go to that corner, and read. And I was always, you go to the dining room table and draw. So I used to go and draw things. So, you know, that's how discipline getting draw. You know, you just go and draw. So, all right. Yeah, that's so kind of, and art, growing up, art to me, you know, they didn't really teach art, you know, in the sense of like, you know, when the music teacher would come into class, you know, she didn't hand you a violin and you like a cello and
No.
you a saxophone and like say, okay, we're going to do Beethoven's Ninth. You'll know when to come in, you know. When you know, no, you might get 2 sticks to click together on a tambourine. So everybody said, ooh, music's hard, you know. And then when the art teacher came in, it was usually, you know, we're going to do, you know, Flag Day's coming up. We're going to do flags.
Oh, yeah.
So you got like maybe 30 kids in the class, and maybe 4 or 5 have like a somewhat inbred talent for art, and everyone goes, you know, 45 minutes later, ooh, look what they did. So they think like, we do these things in 45 minutes all the time. So you'll walk by, people will come, how long did it take you to do that painting?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I usually reply, long enough to get you to stop and look at it.
Good answer. Good answer, I like that one.
Some people will say, all my life, some people will just say, yeah, just move along. I know what you're here for, and then they start to try and figure out how much you're charging an hour for that.
Yeah, there you go.
So, and it's like, no, it's not how it works. So
Too funny.
So are you using soft pastels right now? Which
these
one?
are a little bit softer. I move in and out with what I have. That's one thing is like, I bounce around with the pastels that I have because, heck, they don't always, the color that you're looking for is not always there.
Oh,
So it might be in one brand, it might not be in another. So the downside of pastels is, I can't just like take a warm and a cool, a warm and a cool, and a warm and a cool and mix a lot of colors. You need basically a lot of colors. So that's a downside,
So you're trying to hit the hue and the value?
Yeah.
All at the same time? With
Yeah,
the
I
one
am.
choice?
So I tend to try and like, there's different ways you can go about doing, your underdrawing or whatever. Some pastelists will do just all paint complementary colors, and then paint on top of it to create that energy. I tend to like try to concentrate on what's the color I'm seeing in the different areas, the hue, and then when I wash it down, well, now I have that color set, okay, and now I can build up or down from it there. So a lot of like, a number of pastelists do that. They'll paint like basically the local color and bounce up and down from there.
Do certain pastels work better if you do like a watercolor underpainting?
No, because what the watercolor underpainting is going to do is it sets the image into the paper, and that's what, I'm gonna wash this down with alcohol, and it'll set the image into the paper, so then we have our starting point to go from, and be able to move back and forth. Now, some artists, pastelists, they'll actually use real alcohol for their wash. In part, especially when they go to Europe, because you can't bring isopropyl alcohol on the plane. And it's hard to find it, when you're over in Europe. So they'll go, when they're in Europe, they'll buy alcohol. And so it's usually, vodka or something like that. They'll buy that and they'll use that.
Multi-purpose.
Yeah, it's exactly. So at night, after they're done painting for the day, they have something to drink.
Absolutely.
And it comes in wounds if you need it.
There you go.
So you're not blending in any sense with some of the colors?
No blending yet. We'll get to doing some blending when we basically start, washing it in and everything, and then we'll blend from there. So, and I figured I'd pick up, an ocean scene, because like, hey, it's Winthrop.
Yes.
You're on the ocean.
Oh, there you go.
And it's, my dad's family is from Gloucester, as I said earlier, so I've spent a lot of time in Gloucester. So I tend to gravitate a lot to, ocean scenes. Though that's not my primary, I'll paint whatever speaks to me. That's the key, right? You gotta paint what speaks to you, because otherwise, you're not gonna be putting your full, effort into it. Painting is not just about what we see. All of us can probably paint something from what we see, but it's basically not just from what you see, but also what you hear, what you feel. Like, so how I felt that spray hit my arms, how the sun, was on the back of my neck, how I heard the surf, all these things play into what you end up painting.
They have a nice little museum down in Gloucester.
They do, yes. I actually have a painting in their permanent collection.
Really?
All right.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, when my aunt retired from the bank, they had her retirement party at that museum. And the bank commissioned me to do a painting of Gloucester's, back shore as a gift to my aunt.
You're talking about the Cape Ann Museum?
Yes, and the people who worked the museum saw the gift and asked me if I would, consider putting a piece in their permanent collection. It's like, sure, I get to put a painting in the permanent. Yeah, they don't buy it from you. You donate it. You donate it, but you can say, hey, I'm in this permanent collection.
Yeah, bragging rights.
Mhm.
When I first used to paint, I used to always start in the top left and go to the right. But I don't do that anymore because one of the things is like you might get this working perfectly and then you get the colors down here and it's like all of a sudden things aren't meshing. So this way, if you're bouncing around, you tend to find, what's going right and wrong, and you can correct it a lot sooner than have the whole painting done and like, now you gotta go back and work things again. And I don't tend to use black or white, I tend to use dark colors. These are Sennelier, but they don't have, the blue that I usually tend to use for Sennelier is not in this set. It's a really deep, dark blue, and it really works well. This is a purple, which works really well for shadows and everything.
And is the mark making something that's gonna be blended together? Do you
Yep.
anticipate, how it's gonna
Yeah, it'll be all
smooth
blended.
into one
So-
into another?
So yeah, some of the things is like I'm already mixing some of the colors, here.
Mhm.
So even though I was saying like, people will put, the local color down and go from there. Yeah, I'm putting local color down, but I'm also putting some complementary or colors that just are gonna work great with these. And so it'll just make it easier when you're painting. And I don't worry if I put a wrong color in a spot somewhere, because basically as long as it's a color that's in here, that's in the paintings itself, it'll still work. We'll make it work.
Oh.
Because they already, the Winthrop schools for performing arts already had their big recital.
Yeah.
A lot of little kids. A lot. I guess also play, it's maybe it's the end, the season of this. I don't know.
Got the wind.
Where did you go to school?
Which school?
Art, did you go to art school?
No.
No.
My degree is in business administration. My college degree is from Salem State.
So you're self-taught?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I took lessons here and there from like private teachers, but private teachers meant, as you know, would be just as many people in the class as are sitting here. So I had some good teachers to begin with. One was Phil Perkins. He was really good. He had a place over in Linfield, and he also had a studio up on Rocky Neck in Gloucester.
Oh, it's coming together already.
It's great.
And I mean, I mean, we have a photo here, but as you know, I mean, we can't be slaves to the photo. You know, if
You're
you
absolutely right.
if you sit there and like, you know, try to replicate it, well, why don't I just take a picture of the photo for you? You know, this
I
is
like
why
your
we're
picture
this is
better
why
than
we're
the
artists,
photo.
right? We put the feeling in, you know. As I was saying earlier, you put more into it, what you've heard. You know, that's why it's important for you to go out, you know, even if you don't get to go out and do plein air painting per se, because time doesn't allow or whatever. You have to go out and at least venture out and be in these environments that you're gonna paint. Otherwise, you really can't do them justice, so, you know, what they deserve. Your pieces, your paintings will end up lacking something, you know, be that connection that they'll be lost in.
Did you grid off your photograph?
No, I did not.
Okay.
That's why I said you don't want to sit here, because, I mean, it could take me a couple hours sometimes to draw it, as I like erase it out, and say, this isn't right, you know, and go back and forth and back and forth. So, and you've got probably better things to do with your time.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's a skill set too, just doing that original drawing, I think,
Yeah,
with the pencils.
Yeah.
we're getting it in the right place.
Now, as you switch from different pastel boxes, Jeff, are there different consistencies or composition or?
Yeah, they're different hardnesses and softness and things like that.
So the only way you know which to choose is by experimenting.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at, you know, different things, and then part of it is like, well, what do I want? Again, you know, we don't want to just copy the image. So sometimes it's like, you know, what is it that feels right? I mean, I might see something, but it still might be, you know, I see what that color is, but that really doesn't feel like what it should totally be. Yeah, it's probably going to be something close to it, but, you know, we're going to add and detract from it and things like that to give it that extra, you know, the extra interest and attraction for people.
Do you do this full-time or do you have another job?
Well, I had another job, and they had sold the company in 2020, and they announced it in June of 2020. Now, I injured my back while working for this company, so I suffer from back issues forever, and my surgeon said, you're always going to have these, and he goes, hey, but look on the good side, you'll always know when it's going to rain. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No. So my back's pretty sore right now, my knee's pretty sore, my foot's pretty sore. So I was working at a company, I did desktop support, and, you know, they sold the company, and I asked them when they sold the company, you know, would they still cover my back, and they said yes, and then they turned around and said no.
Isn't that nice?
So I figured, okay, well, I'm just stuck with this bad back, I guess, for the rest of my life. But then I happened to be, you know, I was supposed to lose my job in October of 2020, you know, because they didn't need IT people at the new place. They already had their own IT people. So I happened to be talking actually to a woman that used to be the compliance lawyer for the company, and told her, you know, what the story was, and she said, let me look into that for you. So she looked into it, found me a labor lawyer, and we ended up having to go to court, and I won my court case. It got settled back in December. So I haven't, you know, I hadn't worked since June of 2021. You know, I was supposed to lose my job in October of 2020, but because of issues with the sale of the company and such, it dragged on for a while, and so I didn't lose my job until June of 2021, and the rest of the time was spent like fighting for my back issues.
Do you, when you paint, do you sit then sometimes?
I tend to only paint, I tend to stand. When I do pastel work, I tend to stand. It's funny, when I used to do oils, I tended to sit.
Do you have music playing?
What's that? I always had classical music playing. Maybe jazz once in a while, but mostly classical music. Rock and roll just doesn't do it for me. I'm trying to paint. I listen to rock and roll all the other times. Mostly E Street Radio and Sirius XM.
Cool.
All C symphonies?
Oh, what?
C symphonies?
C symphonies? No, it's whatever they play, you know, on the radio.
Handles water music?
Yeah, it could be. Sometimes I'll sit there and go, oh, that's an interesting song, and I have to go run downstairs and look at the computer to see what the song is. Yeah, because I don't know classical music, you know. But everybody knows classical music if you follow Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny, because they used to play all the time.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that was one good thing about Looney Tunes, they always had classical.
Always had classical music, is right. So, because I belong to a group that meets at least once a month, like via Zoom, and it's called Patio. It's basically pastel artists teaching on the internet and online.
Ah,
And yet, I don't teach, but I sit in so I can hear them and see what they do and everything. But I don't have a place or a spot to teach. I had one time I did a demo for a different art association, and they asked me if I teach, and I said, well, it's the same thing. And they said, well, you know, they had their own space. And they said, well, you can teach here. You just rent the hall.
Yeah.
Oh, and you have to provide, like, you know, snacks for the students. Oh, and you have to pay for the heat and the electricity.
Yeah,
Like, do you know how much I'd have to charge people to like come and teach for me? I was like, that's not gonna work.
So what would you recommend for somebody starting out then?
As far as what?
Like the basics of pastel?
The basics of pastel? Well,
Go online, YouTube, or?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like good, you know, that's one thing that's a big difference between what, you know, obviously when I started out and what is available now, is there's a lot of good information online, you know. You can learn an awful lot of different things, you know, about pastels and how to apply things, how to make your own pastels, how to make your own pastel boards, all kinds of different things you can do, you can learn now. That wasn't there back then, you know. But you know, I don't know about you folks, but if you're anything like me, online is great, but I like to be able to be here and like actually see it, you know, as opposed to, yeah, I'm seeing it online, you know,
Yeah.
but it's not, yeah, and I, you know, if you're watching a video, well, you can't ask a question. You have to just keep rewinding the video and, you know, and hoping that, you know, you understood or understand what they're trying to tell you. But I come from a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher, my daughter's a teacher, my uncle was the head of the history department at Purdue University. One of his sons was an honors teacher for high school out in Albuquerque. So I come from a family of teachers, and actually when I was graduating high school, teaching was one of the things I was interested in going into, but unfortunately Prop 2.5 happened, and I watched as my mother worried time and again about whether she would have a job after each year ended.
So you're always looking for the right chalk that has the right value?
Don't ever call them chalk. You'll have like a bunch of pastel. You'll have a bunch of pastel artists, like, you know, attacking
Excuse me.
you. You are in trouble now.
What do you call these devices? So how much of the value in the hue comes from the blending of these different pigments?
Tend to get, like, try to get the local color, you know, to each piece, but you'll see I blended some in here to do what you're saying, to get that, you know, because I don't have a pastel, you know, or I might, but you're not here to watch me like,
Which one?
which is like how a lot of times it is in my studio, because I'll take a pastel, like say this, put it down, and then I'll go, all right, where did I put that? You know, because they just all tend to blend in, you know, and I have pastels, like I said, all over the place. I have them to the side of me, to this side of me, behind me,
Oh, my God.
they're everywhere.
But they're specific hues though.
Yeah, but each, just like each vendor who makes watercolors, each vendor who makes oils, they'll call an ultramarine blue, but ultramarine blue is different for these
Every
people
single
versus these
brand.
people versus those people. Yeah, you know,
Absolutely.
and that's part of the problem too, you know. You could buy individual sticks, okay, with pastels, whereas, you know, obviously as we were talking about earlier, you know, you could just buy your warm and cool colors of your primaries and go from there with oils or watercolors and things like that. You could buy your individual sticks of your pastels, but that would cost a lot to buy the individual sticks. So, but if you buy a set, and so this is a set, this is Michael Chesley Johnson set. This is his plein air, you know, what he tends to use for plein air. Okay, but I might not see, you know, the way that Michael Chesley Johnson sees, but there's things in here that I can use and I'm gonna use. So that's the problem with buying a set. It's like, I don't see the same way, just like you people don't see the same way. You're watching me paint this, but if you were up here painting this, you might attack it a completely different way. And more than likely, you would be attacking it in a completely different way. Different colors and such, different combinations. So,
Where is
You know.
the best place for you to shop for materials?
all right, so they don't sell a lot of pastels like around here. Artisan Craftsman and Saugus, they sell these, some of these, okay? This is Rembrandt. And their other major one is Senneliers, which is soft. And so you can buy some small sets, but they have like individual sticks of them, okay? They also sell pan pastels. I didn't bring any of those with me. They're like in a cylinder, like plastic cylinder, and you'd almost look at it as like a makeup case. You unscrew it, and you have like an applicator, and a foam applicator. And those I find are good for like doing underpaintings. They have like an umber that's great for like doing sand that I've used before. So they don't work for other aspects of things that I do, but they have, and that's the other thing is like this pastel may work great for this, whereas this one works great for that. You know, so you need a bunch of them. And for me, like one of my artist friends, let me see if I have one in here. I don't know if I have one. I actually might have taken it out when I was putting this together. There's a company, Richardson, they make a bunch of pastels. And one of my friends, pastel artist, an excellent artist, she hates them because she feels they don't play well with the others. You know, where I don't seem to have a problem with that, but the way that she sees and applies color, it obviously does not work for her. You know, so, and that's the same thing with all this stuff. It might not work for you, like what I am like how I see things.
Are the base materials the same for each of these manufacturers?
Yeah, they're
Are they
gonna use the
comprised
same
of
basic
different-
ingredients. That's the thing with pastel.
They're all
And pastel
compatible?
actually, you know, the same ingredients that go into oil paints and everything are basically what pastels are made of. It's just that pastels are more of a pure color. You know, the oils and watercolors, they're broken down to basically, you know, to be liquid. And because of that, you know, that making them liquid. These have very little liquid in them. So they're made into a paste, that's where it comes from, pastiche, pastels. Those darn French, pastiche, right? Plein air, French, right? They make them into a paste, so that there's not a lot of binder in these, so they're more pure color. So if you take care of these, keep them out of the UV, put them under with UV glass. Pastels have to be framed under glass. And I always use museum glass. You'll see them on those finished pieces over there. So you don't see a lot of reflection. It's real expensive to do that, but if you value like what you've just created as an artist, then you're gonna use like, the things to show it off best. So what I run into a lot of times is like, well, how can you charge so much for this painting? Well, one, I don't frame them myself. I don't have the room, I don't have the space, I don't have the know-how. So I have a frame and do it. Two, I use only top of the line, framing stuff. Because don't you want it to look good in your house? So if you, don't want to pay it, then you don't have to pay it. I'm not asking you to. I'd like you to pay it because it means, it means basically that something that I did touched you in some way, and moved you emotionally to buy that painting. But there's several excellent books for landscape painting. There's Elizabeth Mowry has a couple of books about pastel painting. Richard McKinley has one. Portraiture, Daniel Green, he just passed away not too long ago. He was excellent. So I had his book. So I would look at these books. I wouldn't necessarily tether myself to them, but I would like glean some things out of it. Because sometimes too, not for nothing, but sometimes they talk about stuff and I'm like, huh? Because again, I want to see it. Reading it just doesn't do it. The same thing for me. So I want to see it. I do better if I can see how it's working. So, and I learned because, Phil Perkins, he taught everything, but he was good at, pastels. And then Ruth Hagstrom, I took lessons from her up in Gloucester. She was the one who taught my aunt. And she was really good at it too, but it was funny, like, she was a portrait artist, so when you took her class, they always had a portrait model, but I didn't do portraiture, so she would always set me up with an easel out by her furnace, and she would just come over to the doorway, look in and say, "You need any help?" And I'd step back and she'd look at it and she goes, "Nope." And she'd walk off back out to where all the portrait people were.
So what are you using? What's the liquid?
This is isopropyl alcohol, 70%. And when I tend to paint this, I tend to paint the lighter colors first. Especially since I'm only using the same brush here. And I don't mind if it drips down, as you've seen, it dripped down here. And we have like a set of legs now running through the painting. I don't mind that.
Pardon my ignorance, what's the purpose of the alcohol?
Well, we're setting the pastel deep into the grooves of the paper. So as I was saying earlier, people use different methods to put this into the paper. They'll use complementary colors. I tend to use more local color for it, because that way, as I said, I have a good base from which to start.
Is there a particular reason why you're doing it almost like a patchwork. You're not going consistently across the whole painting.
I tend to paint the lighter areas first,
Ah,
because if I took this and I painted across, you know, now I just have a big brown blob through there.
okay.
So I try to paint the areas, you know, that are lightest first.
Now, does that dry fast?
That's why we use isopropyl alcohol, because it tends to dry, you know, fairly quickly. I mean, obviously, there's still gonna be some moisture in there. But I'll show something else that I do while we wait for it to dry. Or something else that I tend to do.
As the liquid goes on, it changes the value,
Yeah.
and does it dry back to the original value that you had?
Yeah, it'll come back closer to it,
Mhm.
you know.
Ah.
As you know, a lot of times, you know, when you wet things, you know, they get darker and they'll come back closer. But that's the advantage also, as I was saying, you know, you have, especially if you're using complementary colors, well, not complementary colors, like the local color, well, you paint it and now you move back up and down from that scale, those colors that you have. Okay, so now we have our base, basically, from which to paint.
Very dramatic.
Can you explain what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm putting the tape, okay? It's putting it on the back, all right? And we're creating what we're gonna be able to use to attach it to the board here. So the rounded piece will keep that solid on the board here, okay? And help it from not lifting while you're painting on it. That'll help it that way. And then this, what we do is we flip it over and we put it on here, trying to make sure that the edges stay at least somewhat, you know, parallel to the edges of the board. And then we take, first we gotta fold this in so we don't lose that. Then we take this, and so this sticky piece that we put on the back, okay, is now facing up, and we put this sticky piece into it. So now you got sticky against sticky, and you just fold this in. And you're gonna go all the way around again.
The boards, can you get those at a hardware store or just?
What, the Masonite boards? Almost every art store sells these. Artisan Craftsman, Art Supply Warehouse up in Beverly,
Oh, yeah, one of my favorite stores.
they sell these. They're not real expensive either, so if you break them or whatever, you haven't lost, you know, a ton of money on it. And I have broken them before. They fall over, you know, in my art studio. So, and that's what it ends up looking like. So, and now, when I take this out plein air painting, I have this to hold on to instead of like sticking my fingers onto the painting. And, well, what was that? Somebody say, why do you use black?
Why do you black?
There you go.
I was
Because
thinking that.
it tends not to reflect back, you know, if I had the white on there, you're on a sunny day, it's like, you know, bad enough, and then the sun's hitting and like blinding you, so.
Oh, what a great idea.
What's that?
Eager.
There you go.
There you go.
So, yeah. You can feel what that feels like. You can feel the sanded surface. There's other companies like the painting I did the other day that I just did plein air painting on Friday. That was on a different brand called Lux Archival. The Lux Archival tends to be white, whereas this tends to come in cream color. The white one can be difficult at times when you're painting outside because, well, you use this to like, you don't have anything on it. Especially like, I started the painting on Friday, the plein air painting, and it was like, whoa, it was like, the white like just blinding back at me because I had the sun behind me. And I was painting these flowers at one of my fellow artists' house, and it was like, yikes. That's bright. So you paint fast to get the colors in. To get that white away.
The texture of the, oh, sorry. Jeff, does the texture of the pastel fill vary? Do you have fine and rough?
Yeah, so the higher, for that brand, the higher the number, the smoother it is. So like 800 is really smooth, so it's not going to layer as well. Most pastels tend to use 400 or 500. I've used up to 600 before, and that was because of, it was a lot smoother. I was like, why isn't this layer in the way? Because it's 600, you moron. It doesn't work the same. Oh yeah, you idiot. What you choose that for? So let's see if this is dry. It certainly feels dry. There'll be colors, as I was saying earlier. If you look at this, come up and look at that sky, it doesn't look anything like that. But this is how I want it to look and how I feel it works. I put a lot of feeling into it. But growing up, I didn't know artists. As I was saying, see, here's the train coming back now. As I was trying to explain about like the art teacher, like, giving you, we're going to do flag drawing. They didn't talk about complementary colors and tertiary colors and positive and negative space and things like that. Really, all I knew about artwork growing up was some guy cut a zero. Well, they didn't teach you. I mean, what did I do? I mean, I would see, it was Alexander before Bob Ross. He was on Channel 2. Bob Ross took over for Alexander.
That was Captain Bob.
Captain Bob. I would sit and watch Captain Bob, draw and things like that. I had a
John Nagy, too.
I had a book of like, drawings of like Disney, the artists that Disney did, and it was like, those are the things you would see in your comic book. Draw Blinky.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Which actually that's what Charles Schultz did. He drew Blinky, and that's where he went to school first. He went through, correspondence art classes.
Will you put another, show me this again?
I don't think think so. I don't know. I've never seen it. I
Like
thought
the
you just,
alcohol, but
I've just seen pastel, they just pastel.
is Reagan home? Did Reagan finish the first year?
Taking a course, 6 o'clock in the morning.
So this is an odd way to phrase the question, but when did you know you were good?
Question.
Well, you know, we'll stop at the odd part. Because, you know, it's not for me to determine if I'm good or not. It's for you people to determine if I'm good. You know, for me, I don't,
When were you happy with what you were doing? I guess is what she's asking.
yeah, that's still not gonna be, you you're never happy, you know, at least I'm not.
What about that feeling when you sold your
When you
first
sold,
piece?
that's what I say, when you sell, probably, you.
Well, when you sell your first one, then it becomes, well,
That'll never happen again.
yeah. Now I gotta sell another one.
Exactly.
Otherwise my wife's gonna continue to yell at me to get my paintings out of her dining room. And she did. She used to yell, "Get these paintings out of my dining room." And I'd say,
You have to justify
"Help me figure out how to sell them. That's your job." Well, you can't have it both ways. Get them out of the out of the dining room and not help me figure out how to sell them.
Okay, everybody, give him a hand. Thank Jeff
Very nice.
for the wonderful deed. Look at how much you got done. This is awesome.
You know, after all those years of playing against Winthrop High hockey, it's probably the only time I get applause in Winthrop. And they didn't like it when I played with soccer against Winthrop. See,
Okay,
Winthrop High hockey owned us in hockey, but we owned them in soccer.
Yeah, there you go. Now, Jeff was also a judge at our Spring Art Festival, so go in and
thank
take a
you.
look
Thank
in
you,
the
Jeff.
gallery. And those are his
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, hopefully you learned something out of all this. Nothing gets finished.
Stop. Go up and look at it.
So when I finish this, I'll send a picture off to Dawn.
Yeah, and then we'll
So
get it.
when they do